As the freeze in U.S. trade talks continues, Prime Minister Mark Carney is continuing his trade mission to Asia today, stopping in Singapore before heading to a South Korean summit where he plans to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. One continent over, there's also potential signs of closer Canadian ties with Europe. Last week, the European Union Commissioner for Democracy visited Canada, meeting with officials like House Leader Stephen McKinnon, Justice Minister Sean Fraser. The commissioner also attended a conference in Montreal about social media's impact on democracy, and its description read, "If we don't act now, our information ecosystems and the democratic values they support could be lost to an unregulated tech oligopoly and an American government that supports it." I spoke to the commissioner about that last week. Michael McGrath is the EU Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law and Consumer Protection. Thanks for coming in. It's really nice to see you here.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be here.
We read that quote from the Montreal conference in the introduction. It's an ominous warning. How close to that sort of trouble where you could see all of these democratic values lost to an unregulated tech oligopoly, how close are we to seeing that happen?
Well, democracy is precious and we have to continue to invest in it and to nurture it. Technology itself is not the problem. It is the misuse and the abuse of technology, and that is why we need to have guardrails. And within the European Union, in recent years, we have developed a very extensive toolbox in the form of regulation. Our digital rule book, the Digital Services Act, we have an AI Act, just to name two examples. So it's about setting the rules that apply to companies that are operating within the European market, whether they be Chinese, American or European companies, and applying them. And we do have to have these safeguards because our democracy is under threat. There are real challenges. There is foreign interference in elections in Europe. There is misinformation and disinformation, and it can be very difficult for ordinary people, ordinary citizens, voters, to navigate what is becoming a really complex and fast-moving information environment. So that's why we need to have a multi-pronged approach to this.
Right.
Support citizens, digital literacy, media literacy, have an independent media sector, which is a crucial pillar in any democratic society, have a strong civil society network, but we do need to have rules in the online world, and we have introduced them and we are determined to enforce them.
You've introduced some of the strictest rules. How would you assess, is Canada keeping up?
Well, it's a matter for Canada and the Canadian authorities to set their own rules and decide on their own policies. But what I would say is that this is a shared challenge, and one of the outcomes of the really successful EU-Canada summit back in June in Brussels was to tackle together this issue of FIMI, so foreign information manipulation and interference and disinformation. And it's a recognition that that is a challenge that recognises and respects no borders. It's an issue in the European Union. We know from the evidence here in Canada and the public inquiry that it's an issue here as well. So we can work together, and there may well be different approaches and different perspectives on specific issues, but I think we both recognise it's a challenge and a threat. And fundamentally, what we want to ensure is that it is the people's democracy, that when people go to exercise their democratic franchise, they can do so in free and fair elections without any foreign interference. That's the objective. It's a matter for people who they decide to vote for in any election, but they deserve to do that independently and without interference.
You're meeting with the Ministers of Justice, Sean Fraser, Industry, Melanie Joly. What specifically do you want to hear from them? What specifically would you like to see Canada doing on this file?
So for the purpose of this visit, there are core priorities. One is engagement on protecting democracy and addressing the issues that we've been discussing. Given the other elements of my portfolio, which are interlinked, enhancing justice cooperation between the EU and Canada is a very important objective. Again, that was highlighted in the summit communique back in June. We have dedicated EU agencies. You've got your authorities here in Canada. We believe they should be working even closer together than they currently are. And also I'm very focused on consumers and consumer protection and ensuring that we can have trust among consumers in the authorities, trust in the platforms that they are dealing with, that your consumer protection rules and ours in Europe and our product safety rules are being fully respected. And we think that that can help to boost trade and confidence in what is a really successful reciprocal trading relationship now between the EU and Canada.
We're in a weird moment for trade internationally as a result of the tariffs and the trade war and all of that, and it's pushing and pulling different priorities all at the same time. One of the things Canada is looking at is expanding our relationships with India specifically. Also, it looks like China. As we do that, what concerns should we be making sure we tackle to open up trade with, say, India or, say, China without opening ourselves up to further interference?
Well, trade diversification is a policy that we are also pursuing within the European Union, and we believe that the international rules-based system should be the way in which we resolve challenges in the system of global trade. And so it's a good thing to negotiate and to enter into these agreements. We always seek to ensure that our values are being respected, of equality, democracy, rule of law, of respect for human rights and human dignity. But of course, in any bilateral agreement, you have to have safeguards that respect your fundamental interests, including the integrity of your democratic systems. And in any of our negotiations, when these issues get raised, if issues are raised around the digital rule book in the European Union, we always say, we respect what you say and we will listen, but it is a matter for the European Union to decide on its own rule book for operations within the EU, not outside of it, but within the EU. And we do that blind to the nationality of any individual company.
But like here in Canada, you don't have to go into intelligence briefings to see who has done what to interfere with Canadian democracy and Canadian interference, for lack of a bigger umbrella term. What do you do when those forces, you want to say, you did things we're uncomfortable with here in our country, and yet we want to do business with you? How do you address that sort of gap, or when those two things do collide and come together?
Well, I think it is through robust engagement. It is through, first of all, investing in your democratic structures and investing in the resilience that underpins it, including the media and civil society, and the tools and the institutions you have to detect and respond to any interference. That's the first thing. When it comes to investment and trade relations, of course, mutual respect and trust is a fundamental part of any successful trading and investment relationship. And you've got to thrash these issues out and deal with them head on. And where you have evidence that there is interference and that country is looking to do more business with you, then you have to address it.
And are there ways that, like Canada and the European Union, Canada and Ireland, like how can we work together to try to reset those global rules and order?
I think the good news is that we are working together. We may well have different ways of doing things, and it's a matter for the Canadian authorities to set their own rules in terms of tech regulation and how they protect democracy and how they engage in trade globally. But we share the same values, and I think we have a common objective. And through the multilateral organisations like the OECD, like the UN, the very close bilateral relationship that we have between Canada and the EU, there is so much that we can learn from each other, and actually we can be a support to each other. And there's no better example than in Ukraine, for example, where Canada has really been to the fore among the international community, working with like-minded partners, including, of course, the European Union. And the support for Ukraine by the Canadian government has been exemplary. But we're going to have to continue to work together to make sure there is accountability for the crimes of aggression that Russia has been perpetrating on the people of Ukraine, and also to ensure that there is compensation. So the setting up of the special tribunal, the setting up of the Claims Commission is going to be a very important next step. And I know that Canada will walk that journey with the European Union in the interests of justice for the people of Ukraine.
Can any of us do that without the United States, though?
United States is clearly a crucial partner, and President Trump has been to the fore in the efforts to try to negotiate a ceasefire and bring about an end to this war. And the involvement of the United States in the last number of years following the full-scale invasion has been really vital for the survival of Ukraine, and that is recognised by President Zelensky. So we all share President Trump's objective to achieve peace. It needs to be a just just and a fair peace, and it needs to involve the European Union, because this is in Europe and the future of Europe is very much relevant here. And of course, when we are discussing issues about Ukraine, the Ukrainians need to be at the table.
At a time, I could talk about this all day. So thank you, really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, Peter. My pleasure.